Welcome back, all you nerds out there. This is Nerdy by Nature. I'm your host, Tyler, aka Agent Smith.
I'm Charlie, aka Captain Rogers.
And after taking a week off from casting, we wanted to be sure and get back to you, the listeners, sooner rather than later. So this episode comes to you earlier than usual this week. And we have a fun episode on tap with a few takeaways from D23, some light Disney Plus news, and of course I feel like we absolutely have to talk about the thing that everybody's talking about.
Right.
And that is the Disney-Sony Spidey saga.
Yeah, not looking good for Spider-Man in the MCU. I'm rather bummed about it. How do you feel about it?
Oh, I was as bummed as you were when you sent me the text message about the news. I was beside myself because, let's be real, it's one of those both were like, here we go again. Are we ever going to get is it too much to ask for a complete, well-done Spider-Man trilogy? Because we're in the same boat again. We're at the same creek with the same paddle, and we know how it rose. Andrew Garfield, with his two films, while they weren't the best, they were watchable, but that fell through the roof.
I enjoyed them more than most, but
it's just one of those things where it died dead in the water.
Right.
To keep with the water analogies here. And then, of course, with Tobey Maguire's, we got a trilogy, but let's be real. Spider-Man 3, it's really hard to count that one. It's a trilogy. There's no debating that. It is the definition of a trilogy, but as far as quality, that third movie is not exactly what any of us were expecting. And we could have a whole other episode on Spider-Man 3.
Right.
But here we are again. We've had great success with Homecoming. Far From Home we did the movie review on. We recommend you go back and listen to that episode if you haven't. But here we are again, where we just don't know. It's up in the air right now as to whether or not there's anything even going to be renegotiated at this point.
And looking back on the history of it, it almost seems like it's a Sony curse of sorts. Just because it was Sony the last two times around, that I don't know if it's necessarily them putting a kink in things, but everything I've read, it sounds like they are the ones kind of putting a bump in the road. Obviously, yes, Disney did come back asking for more money, but at the end of the day, they're a business, and they're going to renegotiate to where it benefits them, just as much as Sony is going to try and negotiate for it to benefit them. So, I mean, it's starting to feel like a curse of sorts, and even the director of Spider-Man 3 with Tobey Maguire has said that wasn't really him even wanting to do it anymore. There was some bad blood there, and so the product of it was what we got in the movie.
And with the whole business deal that was in place with the 50-50 split, I see both sides of it. Disney being a business like they are, they wanted to make sure to get their hands on a little bit more of the pie, as they often tend to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then from the Sony side of it, of course they had that crazy, 90%, 10% split, where Sony was getting 90% of the profit and Disney was taking 10%. I'm sure, of course, if you're getting 90% of the profit in the deal that you and I have, and then I come to you and ask for 50%, I would say you're not necessarily going to be obliged to be like, sure, 50% all of a sudden sounds fair. I think Sony saw what they had with Tom Holland as Spider-Man, the franchise, and where it was going, and realized, let's go ahead and keep this 90-10 train rolling right along. And Disney realized, is this really best for business interests? I don't see why we can't share the character. We're giving you our MCU platform.
Right.
You're giving us the character, but you still technically have the rights to, because let's remember, Spider-Man is on loan to Disney right now from Sony. It's technically still their character.
It is, and I agree with you, but on the other hand, I feel like I would understand if I was getting 90% of something and you were only getting 10, and you were putting in the work just like I was. I may not be happy about it, but I can still understand that you would want more and would want to negotiate to your benefit. And so I just feel like they're not looking at it the right way. And yes, I understand that Disney is a huge corporation. They make all the money in the world, but they are still in fact a corporation. They are still here to make money, and so they're always going to negotiate for better terms that benefits them.
Right.
It's just a sucky situation all the way around.
It's no fun for us the fans, because it's one where it's going to be this back and forth between Disney, who has expanded their Magic Kingdom into an entertainment empire over the years, and then Sony, who has had some success. Let's not forget, they did come out with the big hit in 2018, won the Oscar for Best Animation, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, so we know that a good Spider-Man movie can be done.
Yeah, they finally did it.
I just don't I just don't know that I necessarily trust Sony at this juncture with a third installment of the Web Slinger when I don't see it being on par with the first two MCU versions, I should say.
Right.
But it remains to be seen.
I don't know that I trust them either, especially when the star of their movie is just as upset about leaving the MCU, or so it seems, as everybody else is. So is he going to be putting in 100% in the third installment for Sony? I mean, it just doesn't seem like it's beneficial for anybody for this deal to fall through. It seems like it would be much more beneficial for them to work it out and do whatever they have to do to make it work, because I'm already seeing where people are saying they're going to boycott Sony, and I mean, obviously that's going to be a hit on them if they don't have anybody coming to see their movie.
Oh, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if there's some kind of petition floating around right now to make this deal happen or permanently get Spider-Man in the rights of Disney as a whole.
Right.
I mean, to me, we've had this conversation before. Personally, I wouldn't even necessarily be surprised at all if on down the road Sony cuts some kind of multi-billion-dollar deal much in the same way that Fox did. I mean, because at this point, Sony is really holding on to Spider-Man and his villains.
Right.
And that's a big piece of the pie to hold on to, but I feel like Sony as a company stands to make a lot more in profits and shares by selling that back to Disney and Marvel, and just going ahead and letting Marvel have essentially what Marvel has done with the help of Disney at this point, is bought back successfully all of their rights and characters, because of course there was a time way back in the early 2000s where Marvel wasn't doing so hot, and so they sold all their rights away to all these other corporations to make movies, and now of course they're slowly starting to try and get those back, and they're almost there. I feel like Sony is the last piece of the puzzle here.
Right. Yeah, and I realize that Sony has a big piece of the puzzle, but I think they're overlooking the fact that it's not going to hurt Disney to lose Spider-Man as far as the MCU goes. It may hurt because, yes, Spider-Man has become a big part of the MCU now, almost a leading part of the MCU, but at the same time, they weren't hurting before Spider-Man came into the MCU. Sony, on the other hand, things weren't looking great in their Spider-Man universe before the MCU. So
a lot of canceled projects.
Right. So I just feel like they have to be over at Sony trying to figure out a way to make this work. I think that it would be in Sony's best interest more so than Disney's best interest to make this work. Now, I haven't heard any kind of situations where Sony's hurting for money or anything like that, but at the same time, I've heard rumors that Apple and Sony have been in talks in the past about an acquisition, and from what I hear, if that does happen eventually, that part of the contract is that the rights to Spider-Man and all that would go back to Marvel if they sold to Apple. So I just feel like either that's going to happen sooner or later, or they need to work something out with Disney.
And I think the hope for us, we the fans at this point, is that ultimately Sony and Disney get on the same page. They've been there before, and I feel like they can get there again. And I liken this, being a big sports fan, to no different than an NFL contract holdout situation.
Right.
You've got the player and the team. And I think in this case, the player is Disney and the team is Sony.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, the player wants a little more slice of that pie. Hey, we're putting up all these numbers, we're doing all these figures. Mm-hmm. And Sony's saying, well, yeah, that's great and all, but we are the team and we're providing you the facility, etc., etc. So I'm hoping that they can get into that renegotiation mode and figure something out. Time, fortunately, is on their side right now. We've got the rest of this year and parts of 2020 before production would realistically have to begin on a Spider-Man 3 film. So there is time. How do you, Charlie, let me ask you this to kind of segue into the second part of this discussion here. There have been rumors floating around that there could be such a deal already on the table. It would include 6 total Spider-Man films. Who wouldn't sign up for that tomorrow?
Right.
More of the wall crawler for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
With a possible 7th film, it would introduce his college days, maybe even some superhero friends like Johnny Storm, the Human Torch. So what are your thoughts on that, or the believability that could happen?
I mean, I would love for that to be the case, and I hope sincerely that is an option that's on the table and that they're thinking about it. But at the same time, looking at the sources, at least from what I've read and seen, it feels more like just a fan that's put out this as they want this to happen, and it's like a dream come true scenario versus any realistic parts to it. So I mean, like I said, I hope that that's on the table, and I hope that's being talked about. But right now, I chalk it up to a fan putting out what his dream would be and hoping that people believe it.
I think ultimately at this point we're just going to have to label this one as TBD, to be decided.
Right.
But of course, something that is official is going to be everything that came away from the D23 Expo. Speaking of Disney and speaking of Marvel, there were some big announcements in that we're going to have more shows coming from Marvel. So we're pretty excited about this. Charlie, what did we get from D23?
Oh yeah, we got all kinds of announcements. We've got a She-Hulk show and a Miss Marvel show, as well as Moon Knight. So I'm very excited about all three of them. Well, actually, let me take that back. I'm excited about She-Hulk and Moon Knight. I don't really know anything about Miss Marvel. It doesn't seem like a very interesting character in my opinion, but who knows? I mean, it could be something good.
And in your defense, Miss Marvel is one of those newer characters, debuted back in February of 2014. Fun fact, she's actually the first Muslim character to headline her own comic book, and that's none other than Kamala Khan. And of course, she is a shape-shifting type of superhero. She coined her name after Carol Danvers. Of course, everyone knows her as Captain Marvel.
Alright.
So in this case, Kamala Khan is Miss Marvel. And so she is a Pakistani-American teenager, kind of going through sort of like a Peter Parker, if you will, type story.
Mm-hmm.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there's even a comic book run out right now with those two together. So that would be kind of fun to see.
Spider-Man and her?
And Miss Marvel. I believe I saw that advertised somewhere. I'll have to check and do my research and make sure I'm not just telling a fib.
Right.
But, so I'm interested to see how that one looks and what that will look like and who they'll cast. Going back to Moon Knight, I think that one, for me, is one of the biggest takeaways because that is a very interesting character.
Oh yeah, I've always been interested in that character, and I've got a couple of comic books with him in it over there on the wall, but he's always been portrayed, in my opinion, and from everything I've read about him, as Marvel's answer to Batman, basically. Just very surface level comparison, but he's an interesting character for sure, and I'm excited about that show.
I am too, and for a number of reasons. One being especially that, like you said, he's often described as that Batman-esque character, or sort of a lesser Batman in some ways, given that he deals with multiple personality disorder. And so you kind of think about that for a second. If you've got a Batman Bruce Wayne type character that is almost like the Joker in a sense,
yeah,
going around at night taking out bad guys, you just kind of hope that he's always on your side.
Right. You definitely want somebody with powers like that on your side.
No doubt. This is somebody that, of course, fittingly enough, draws some of his power from the phases of the moon.
Right. Makes sense.
So, right, goes hand in hand. Moon Knight, pretty appropriate.
Uh-huh.
But so he can draw some strength, endurance, enhanced reflexes, and this all, of course, again, depends on the phase of the moon. So, for example, the fuller the moon, the more strength or endurance or reflexes that he gets or derives from it. And supposedly even during a new moon, so when there's no moon out, but of course it's still there and present within the Earth's atmosphere, he can still lift several hundred pounds and has all sorts of acrobatic skills that he can apply. So, definitely a guy that has a lot to offer, possibly even in the MCU. Of course, it's just going to be a streaming TV series to start with, but I feel like all of these characters that we just mentioned, whether it's Moon Knight or Miss Marvel or She-Hulk, they could potentially spin off or find their ways or walk their way into a future MCU film.
Oh yeah, I definitely feel like they're setting all these characters up to either kind of be like a test run on the Disney Plus platform, and then either bring them into the bigger MCU movie side of things, or else, I mean, they might even start doing MCU movies on the Disney Plus platform. We don't really know how big it's going to get yet, but I know that every character that has a show on the Disney Plus platform is going to be involved somehow in the greater MCU.
And we all know that Marvel loves to interweave their storylines, so it wouldn't surprise any of us.
Absolutely.
And I think the biggest surprise show that was announced probably has to be She-Hulk, because that's a character that we've all known about for a long time, but not necessarily one that I would have expected to ever actually get a show.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know that she is a popular one At least for the people that love the Hulk, I've heard that she's a popular character, but not one that I knew a whole lot about, just from what I've read about her and heard about her in different shows and articles and stuff. But I've never really read a comic run with her in it. I know that she was a part of the Fantastic Four at some point, but that's really the extent of my knowledge on her.
I know she also made an appearance in the Civil War run as well, but again, just as sort of a tertiary or quaternary character.
Right.
But just to give you a little back history for you, the listener, that may also be unfamiliar with who She-Hulk is, the character is Jennifer Walters, who is the cousin of none other, no surprise here at all,
Right.
of Bruce Banner, and she suffers a injury that requires an emergency blood transfusion. And so, of course, Bruce steps up. I would assume in this particular storyline he is the only matching blood donor. Of course, would probably, understandably so, have some reserve as to, should I do this with my gamma ray
I would think.
infected blood? But, of course, it's family. You have to do what you have to do for family.
Right.
He goes through with it knowing the risk, and of course, as it turns out, Walters acquires a milder version, if you will, of the Hulk condition from Banner, and the rest is history. Now we've got She-Hulk, so she's got, of course, all the similar powers to the Incredible Hulk, just not obviously as powerful, but
Right.
arguably one of the most powerful female Marvel characters, right up there toe-to-toe with Captain Marvel, at least in terms of strength.
Right, and she, as far as what I've read about her, when she turns into her Hulk form, she still keeps her personality and her intelligence and everything. Just so she becomes a Hulk, but she's a lot less, I guess, volatile and animalistic than Bruce Banner.
And of course, she is a lawyer by day, and then of course, obviously, She-Hulk whenever she feels necessary.
Right.
I don't want to say by night, because you can go Hulk whenever you need to pull out the big green machine.
Right.
But I'll be interested to see what comes of this show. And again, I think all three of these are going to be great additions, in addition to shows like Winter Soldier and Falcon and WandaVision.
Oh, yeah.
And speaking of, we'll stay on the Marvel track here, we've got another big announcement coming out of D23. Has to be arguably Game of Thrones star Kit Harington is going to be weaved into the MCU now.
Yes, he's been cast as the Black Knight. Very, very reminiscent to his character on Game of Thrones, actually, from what I've read. It looks like he's going to take part in the Eternals movie, and he is going to be the, I'm assuming, love interest opposite of Cersei is the character's name, another Eternal, which is going to be played by Gemma Chan. So the Eternals, I've already stated I'm not that well versed on those characters, but I am excited about that movie. And what do you think about this? Are you excited about it?
I'm excited about it because, of course, as we already know, those that have watched Game of Thrones, if you haven't, it's a bit of a slog, but it's certainly doable. So, go out if you've got HBO Go or HBO Now and give it a shot if you're willing to dive into that realm.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that Kit Harington is a smart selection here because he did so well as Jon Snow, so he can definitely play that role. I hope for his sake that he doesn't initially get typecast in Hollywood as, we'll only ever give him a early centuries knight role.
Right.
But I do think he's going to be a great actor in that role. And then, of course, I don't know a whole lot about Gemma Chan, but she certainly looks the part for Cersei, just based on what we've seen from the comic book version of Cersei. So while there's a lot that we don't know about the Eternals, we'll certainly find out in 2020. That's right around the corner. And so this will be an exciting movie that will definitely be otherworldly in the MCU.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in it just because I think it's going to be a lot like Guardians of the Galaxy in that it's a departure from everything else they've done. And so it's just a good way to move into another realm or area of the Marvel Universe.
And we've got some big names on the bill here too, and Richard Madden, Angelina Jolie, and Salma Hayek. Of course, Hayek playing Ajak, Jolie playing Thena, and Madden playing Icarus. So this one is definitely one to keep on your movie radar for next year, without a doubt. And something else that you're going to want to keep on your radar, and this is a more recent radar check you'll want to do, actually just around the corner. It's crazy how fast this year has gone.
Oh, yeah.
So Disney Plus, of course, as we've talked about a number of times on this show already, is going to officially launch November 12th. And you can get a bundled package including Hulu Plus and ESPN Plus. Let me say that again in case you've missed some of our other episodes. You can get both Hulu Plus and ESPN Plus, in addition to Disney Plus. Got that? For $12.99. It's a heck of a deal. It's one that personally I'm going to be investing in. I want to share that right off the bat. I'm excited to see what this brings. And if you haven't watched the trailer, I highly recommend that you go and do so because it will probably sway you to pay down for this particular service. It's going to be big.
You mean the trailer for Disney Plus?
For Disney Plus.
Yeah,
It was released on YouTube and I believe other forms of social media by Disney and Pixar, and they know what they're doing in the trailer department. We'll put it that way.
It's very well put together, I will tell you that if you had any thoughts of not signing up, you probably won't question it once you watch the trailer. I mean, it's just mind-boggling what you're going to get for $12.99 a month, or even $7.99 a month if you just get Disney Plus versus the bundle with the Hulu Plus and ESPN as well.
And personally, I would be excited just to have the Disney Plus. So the fact that I'm going to get Hulu and ESPN plus National Geographic and Star Wars, all those films, the number of movie clips that they showed in the trailer alone got my inner Disney kid excited about, okay, this is something that I need.
Right, and not even just Star Wars films, but also the TV show spinoff, The Mandalorian. I mean, that alone is enough to get excited for. It looks great. I've seen the trailer. I watched it a couple of days ago, actually, and it looks like it's going to be very interesting and entertaining. And I read that Disney is going to go with a different format than Netflix, and they're going to release their shows weekly versus the whole season at one time. So I think that'll be a lot better way and a nice change of pace. And I think it really builds anticipation for the show versus, oh, you watch the whole thing and then you're waiting for the next season, and so you don't really have anything to talk about. I think it'll really push people to have conversations at work the next day or whatever the case may be. And, oh, did you see that episode? And what do you think will happen in next week's episode? And things like that. So I think it'll be a good change of pace for them to do that.
I have to agree, and I think in a sense we as a society have become a little bit binge dependent, especially with sources like Netflix, like
Right.
Hulu, like HBO. Of course, not so much with HBO. They tend to be the ones that follow that. We're going to release it every Sunday, and then of course you go to work on Monday, you've got something to talk about. So I feel like
Right.
Disney understands and picks up on that and says, hey, you know what, this is a little bit different than the other industry streamers, and it works for HBO. Don't see why it won't work for us. And I'm excited about The Mandalorian. I watched the trailer as well, and I think I don't want to oversell it, having little knowledge about exactly what the show is going to be based around.
Right.
But it seems to me, it looks like it's going to give us a closer look into the life of a bounty hunter, such as a Boba Fett type. And of course, he's a long-time fan favorite, so I feel like that's going to be a big draw
Oh yeah,
for
definitely.
this show. And it also takes place 5 years after Return of the Jedi, so that's an interesting in-between, maybe even sort of like a filler period,
Right.
right before the new trilogy, so much in the way of one of my favorite Star Wars films, Rogue One.
Right, and I haven't seen Rogue One. It is on Netflix, so I will probably watch it, I don't know, maybe one day this week, because I have heard great things about it. I don't really know why I haven't watched it. I just haven't gotten around to it. I always considered myself more of a casual fan of Star Wars, but here recently I've realized that I'm a lot more of a fan than even I knew, and so I need to watch that one. I never watched Solo either, and I don't know that I plan on watching that one. I've just heard mixed things, and not that it was a bad movie, just that it was an unnecessary movie.
Let's be real, it was pretty much a cash grab.
Right, so I'll probably steer clear of that one and just keep my view of Han Solo intact instead of watching something that's a totally different person playing the character when it was supposed to be like right at the same time that the original character was in the movies. So I just don't see a need for it, but I will watch Rogue One here soon just because I've heard such good things.
And you won't be disappointed. I highly recommend it for anybody, especially if you haven't watched it. It's one that you want to go out and pick up a copy or stream it on Netflix. Absolutely. It's just such a good story in between, of course, the episodes 1 through 3 and then
Right.
episodes 4 through 6. It's just wonderfully told, and the acting is superb. And really, there's not a huge name per se in the movie, but I think that's why I like it so much. It's
Right.
just, again, great storytelling and well acted all
Right.
the way around.
Well, it was available on Netflix. I'm assuming it still is, but I could be wrong. I don't know. I'll have to look into that this weekend.
And speaking of looking in, too, this brings us right to the end of our show. So next up on tap for Nerdy by Nature, we're going to actually, on the Star Wars note, stay directly with that. The new movie is going to come out in December. Of course, the trailer dropped, a newer trailer. It's a kind of a sneak peek
Right, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily call it a full trailer, but it had some very interesting and thought-provoking things in it.
Could end up being a big moment in this last installment of the trilogy. It looked like what we could see anyway. It looked like that Rey's character was in all black. Looked like there was a noticeable change in her demeanor, and yeah, the red lightsaber
color shift.
Which, for the most part, if you've been following the Star Wars saga at all, red usually means bad.
Right.
Now, of course, it could be a ploy. She might be fooling the dark side and will turn back over to the Force in this movie. Of course, as yet to be seen. We'll have to wait until December. But I feel like a lot of people that watched that particular sneak peek or teaser trailer are left with more questions than answers for what we're going to get in this last installment by J.J. Abrams.
Yeah, it left me speechless and with a lot of questions, and I just don't see them putting something so pivotal and major to the story right there in a trailer. So I have a feeling there's some kind of trickery or something going on there, but I could be wrong. I just don't see them revealing something that big in a 1 minute trailer.
One would hope not, but I will say from the trailers that we've seen so far, it looks like it has a chance to be the epic conclusion that we're all hoping for.
Yeah, I sincerely hope that they do it well. I wasn't nearly as critical as other people have been about this new trilogy. I really enjoyed The Force Awakens, but I know J.J. Abrams has a lot of stuff to address to appease fans.
There'll certainly be some loose ends that need to be tied up and smoothed out. Some rough edges there in this third and final installment, but yeah, definitely both of us are excited to see it, and I'm sure all of our listeners are as well. And that's going to wrap things up for this edition of Nerdy by Nature. In our next episode, as previously mentioned, we will be providing a Star Wars synopsis, along with predictions as to what we can expect from Episode 9, Rise of Skywalker, which, again, will hyperdrive its way into theaters this December. So until then, be sure to Spidey thwip that like button, share our cast with your friends and family, and subscribe like you would if the Daily Planet were a real newspaper to the show. I'm Agent Smith.
I'm Captain Rogers. God bless.